Hey and welcome gurus to this demo lesson, Map a Custom Domain to your Azure Front Door. I'm Chase, one of your Azure training architects here at A Cloud Guru, a Pluralsight company, and it's in this lesson that we're going to use a case study scenario to help us understand what we're going to see whenever we do our demo setup inside of the Azure Cloud Sandbox. And then we're going to go through the demonstration steps involved in mapping a custom domain to our Azure Front Door, and then we'll bring it back to the slides for some key takeaways. So for our Control-Alt-Suites organization, we're going to have our Azure Front Door deployment when we do our demo setup. Behind that, we're going to have two application gateways, one in East US and one in West US, and everything is going to be pre-configured when we do the setup. We're going to have a route that is routing traffic from that Azure Front Door front-end endpoint to those resources running behind those application gateways in those two different regions. Now, as always, the setup for the demonstration is available in the resources of this lesson. Just make sure to grab that file so that you can set it up using the Cloud Shell when you deploy your resources. Now, as you're familiar with, whenever you deploy Azure Front Door, you get a Microsoft Azure provided domain name for your front door. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually adding a custom domain to our front end so that we use a custom domain as our front end endpoint. We're going to add that custom domain, validate that custom domain by creating a CNAME record in our DNS zone. Now, this is one where you have to have a domain to follow along. And if you do, fantastic. You just need to follow the steps of adding a CNAME record into your DNS zone at your specific hosting provider. And then once you've done that, you can just update the route configuration. Now, if you don't have a custom domain, that's perfectly all right. You can just watch and see how it's done, and understanding the process is more than enough to prepare you for the exam. Now, once we've mapped this custom domain, what we're going to do is evaluate that routing decision by testing where the traffic goes to make sure that that update to our routing configuration now is encompassing that new custom domain. And then we're going to review the configuration here and kind of discuss how we might make this a production-ready deployment. All right, gurus, without further ado, let's make our way into the Azure portal and get started. All right, gurus, here we are inside the Azure portal in our Cloud Sandbox, and we have our Cloud Shell open. The very first thing that we're going to do here is grab that demo setup from the resources of our lesson. Once we have that open, we're going to copy that down, bring it back to our Cloud Shell, and we're going to paste it in. Now, it's going to ask us to provide a username, so we'll give our username, and then provide a password, and this is going to be that username and password for our virtual machines. And then it's going to ask for an artifacts location SaaS token. We don't have one, so we'll just hit enter here. And it's going to go off and deploy all of our resources and set up our demonstration with Azure Front Door deployed. And then we're going to get into working on our custom domain. Now, this can take about 15 to 30 minutes variably in time to deploy. So don't feel like you have to stay here at your desk. Feel free to go grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice. And we'll be back once this is done. All right, gurus, so we're back and our resources have finished provisioning. So if we minimize our Cloud Shell here and we minimize the essentials portion of the resource group, what we'll see is we have 18 resources. We have that front door profile. So if we go into that front door profile and we go to our front door manager under settings, what we'll see is we have everything set up. We have that Azure Front Door provided subdomain, we have a default route, and we have a default origin group. And inside of this origin group, we have two origins, which are those application gateways, one in the hub virtual network and one in the spoke virtual network. Now, at this point in our demonstration, with everything set up, what we're going to do is focus on setting up a custom domain. So we'll go to domains here under settings, and we'll click add to add a domain. Now, for DNS management here, we have to specify whether or not this is Azure Managed DNS, which is recommended, and it makes it a whole lot easier in setting up that custom domain. But if you're using another DNS service, so if your DNS is at another provider, well, then you have to select this option. Again, as you can see here, it would automate a whole lot of things because it would allow us to select the DNS zone and select the domain. But I have my domains over at Namecheap, so I'm going to use another DNS service here. And then I'll provide my DNS name, thecloudchase.com. Again, you provide yours here, and if you don't have one, that's fine. And then I would move down to enabling the HTTPS protocol, either using a Azure Front Door managed certificate, or if you brought your own certificate, you'd select that here. And then you select your TLS version 1.0 or 1.2, and then you click add. Now this can take just a moment to add this custom domain, so we're going to skip ahead a couple of minutes when this is done. Alright gurus, so we're back and our custom domain has finished provisioning. We see it's in a succeeded state here, and we see the validation state is pending. Now, in order to validate this domain, what you have to do is you'll click here on pending, and you'll be presented with a TXT record that you'll use to validate your domain. So I'm not going to show my Namecheap page just for security reasons, and also every domain provider is going to do it a little bit differently, but the main thing here is you're going to create a TXT record. That record name is going to be this right here, and the value of that record is going to be that there under the record value. And if you need to generate a new TXT record, you'll click regenerate here, but you can only do that every 60 minutes. Once you've created that, it may take some time for it to actually validate your domain. So once it has changed from a pending state, you'll know that you have a green check mark and it is validated. And then from there, what you're going to want to do is you're going to associate it by clicking here on associated, and you're going to associate it with that domain. You'll select the front-end endpoint that is the Azure front door provided one, and then you'll select the route that you want to enable this for, the default route in our case. Click associate, and it's going to update that route here, associating this custom domain with our Azure front door provided domain. Now, the next thing that we'll have to do is we'll go to front door manager here, and we'll see now we have that custom domain here, but what is needed in order to map this custom domain to our Azure front door subdomain is create a CNAME record. So you'll create a CNAME record, and the record is going to be a mapping from your custom domain to the Azure front door subdomain that's provided. Once you've done that, once you've got validated, you'll be able to visit this solution you have running here on Azure front door using your custom domain. Now, we're not going to wait around for this to happen in this demo, as this is an Azure Cloud Sandbox and times out after about 4 hours, and some DNS changes can take 6 to 8 hours, and if you're pointing name servers, even 24 to 48 hours. So this is how you set up a custom domain name here. At this point, we've completed the demonstration. Let's make our way back to the slides for a quick review of this lesson. All right, gurus, congratulations on following along in the demonstration. If you were not able to follow along, no worries. As I said before, you do not have to have actually followed along and actually need to walk through the configuration steps of setting up a custom domain name to be able to pass the exam. Being familiar with mapping custom domain names using an Azure front door deployment is more than enough information to go and take the exam. Now, the key takeaways from this lesson here are the purpose of mapping our custom domain name. Remember, our domain name is that public-facing front end for our end users. So we want to have something that is personable to our organization, such as pluralsight.com. We don't want to have that Azure front door domain because that is going to be a unprofessional front end for whatever it is we're trying to serve up. Unless this is something that's internal, then that would be perfectly fine. Now, the reason that we have that mapping of the custom domain name is it makes routing easier for us, because then we can have multiple domain names based on whatever it is we have running behind our front door, so that we can map it to various back-end solutions running in those origin groups. All right, gurus, that is all my time for now. Thanks so much for joining me in this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.